So I forgot to hit record when I did the professional development on your Google Classroom end of the year cleanup. So I am recording the session right now. So here we go. Okay, so I put together a presentation to just kind of keep me on task. So Google Classroom cleanup, here we go. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is only clean up Google Classrooms that you owned and you created. So just keep that in mind as we go through. You are cleaning up your classrooms. If you are in other people's classrooms as co-teachers, you can either unenroll yourself or you could just go to them and say, hey, would you delete me from your classroom? Do not archive classes that are still in session. So if you are still teaching, you're still collecting work from students through Google Classroom, you don't want to archive it right now. But we'll go through some things that you can do right now to get you ready for Teacher Workday, where you can go through and archive your classes. Like I said, if you're a co-teacher or a principal in a teacher's classroom, do not archive or delete the Google Classroom. This goes for the classroom calendar too. All right, so we're going to go over how to return student work, sort of have a discussion around that. The classroom folder is really important. So Google Classroom creates this thing called the classroom folder. And we don't want to delete this folder because that's one thing that you can never get back once you delete. It's very complicated if you do mess with that folder at all. The classroom calendar, we'll touch on that. And then the final step is archiving your classroom. And we'll also talk about how to make a template. So returning students' work, there are a couple ways to do this. So when you're in your Google Classroom, there's this thing called To Review. And that gives you a view of all of your classes, and then you could go in and see, if it says that there are some kids that are not graded, like there are assignments in there that are not graded, but they're turned in, you can look at those. Or you could go to the grade section of each class and then return the work that way. So just some background, when a student turns in their work virtually in a Google Classroom, what they're doing is they're transferring ownership to the teacher. So it's kind of like they're going into that sharing setting and they're no longer the owner. They just have view access. So when they turn it in, they only have view access. So if you would then delete that assignment when they only have view access, it would be deleted for them also. So just kind of think about that. So when you're returning the work, you're in essence giving them back the ownership of that assignment. But I would think that big assignments, big projects that they've put a lot of work into, and it's really their work, you would probably want to return that. But that's, of course, your prerogative on how you want to handle that as a teacher. Just like if they were turning in a test and maybe you don't return those tests. So I always try to think about the virtual classroom in comparison to the paper pencil classroom. So like I said, there may be assignments you do not want to return. So you make that decision, not me. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like. So the review section, if you go to your Google Classrooms, here's all the tiles. So I kind of call those your tiles. And then there is this review right here. You could also go to the hamburger menu and you could get to it there. So there's usually two ways to always get to stuff in Google. So I'm going to click on To Review. And as you can see in this drop-down menu, it indicates that I'm looking at all of the classes. So if I scroll down, I'm looking at all of the classes. So this is something that Google's AI just kind of said, hey, I'm thinking you need to look at this. Up here are things that I have in my Google Classrooms that do not have a due date. So if I just click on that little shark tooth, that will open up those things that I have that do not have a due date. So you can click, so prepare for the FAFSA. So there's one turned in, one assigned. I don't have any graded. So I'm gonna click on this. And then if I select all students, then it gives me the option to return that assignment. So you can go through, return, and just return, and you're done. You could always add a comment there also. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just to go into each individual class and click the grade section. And if you scroll down to something turned in, let's see. So right here, and click on the skinny snowman and then just return all. So obviously it's grayed out for me. Let's see, I don't know if I have anything that I can return all. There we go. So return all, and then it'll bring up this again. You could add a comment and then return. All right, returning students' work. Da-da-da. Google Classroom folder. So it's really important that you do not delete your Classroom folder. I cannot say this enough. Google Artificial Intelligence creates this Classroom folder called Classroom the minute you create your very first class. And then in that folder, each individual class you create after that then gets a subfolder in that Classroom folder. Do not delete this master Classroom folder. But you can go in to the Classroom folder and organize the subfolders to your heart's content. So you can do that. I would suggest creating an archived or 2021 folder and then moving all of your Classroom folders from this year into that folder, and then you have a clean, it's a little more organized. And then you could also create a folder for exemplary work. So I'm sure you have students that just knocked it out of the park with an assignment that you gave, and it would be nice to have those examples. So you could create a folder that houses those examples, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so here's my drive, and here's Classroom. I added the little brain emoji behind it, but I didn't change the name at all. This is the Classroom folder. I did change the color so that it jumped out at me. And you can do that by right-clicking on any folder and then do change color. So you can do that. So let me open this up. And here are all of the Google Classrooms that I have. Now, some of these are archived actually, but they still show up here. So that is why I would suggest making a folder, a subfolder within Google Classroom, because here's my breadcrumbs, my drive, and then I'm in my Classroom folder. So you can always refer to that up there. It's called like the breadcrumbs. And then if you click on the little shark tooth here and select new folder, and I'm gonna put a little emoji. And let's see if I can find the emoji with the mask. There we go. And then I'm just going to do 2020, 2021. Oop. All right. Exit out. And then, so I'm going to create that subfolder. And because I put the emoji at the front, it will show up at the tippy top of there. Now, it would have anyway because it's a number, to be quite honest. Now, if you notice, this is a Classroom folder that it's showing up because I'm a co-teacher in this class. So some teachers added me as a co-teacher just so I could take a look and help with organization. So this is still showing up, and I cannot move this to the 2021 folder. It will add a shortcut, but if you look here, it's still here, but if I open up, it's right there. So I added a shortcut to it, but I personally cannot move it from there. But what I can do is I can delete it. And if you notice, you're like, wait a minute, you told me not to mess with other people's stuff. If you read the warning, it says adaptive PE folder will be removed from view. So it's just being removed from my view, but collaborators will still have access. Collaborators meaning the owner of the class, the teacher. So I can remove it from my view, but they will still have access to it. I'm going to move my other Classroom subfolders to this 2021 folder. So I'm just going to hold the Shift key down. So I highlight this. I don't want to double click to open it, but I just want to highlight this. Click. Yep. So those are all my folders. So I'm going to move these. I'm just going to grab them and drag them and put them right in there. So 7 folders have been moved. It always gives me the option to hurry up and rethink what I've done and click undo if I would want to, but that time has passed. If I double click on here, here are all of those classes. All right, so here are my classes from this year that I'm going to archive. Now, I mentioned before that you might want to have a folder where it has student work examples. So like student, so we'll just call it student examples. So this is like exemplary work that you really want to highlight. And you want to have a couple of those just so you could share with your class next year. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this. I talk to other technology integration specialists around Ohio and I'm like, hey, what should I tell my teachers to do at the end of the year? And this was a suggestion, so I want to share. So here's my student example. Now, if you notice, it's kind of boring, so I'm going to click the N. So just to jazz it up a little, and I want it to go to the very top, I'm going to add an emoji. And I'm just going to pick this like little, party popper is what it's called, a party popper. And click OK. And because I added the emoji, you notice it goes to the top, even though it's student example, which is S, it's not alphabetical. So now you're like, well, how do I find my student example work? So I'm going to go here to one of my classes. So here's my example class. And these are all of the assignments that I've assigned to my class this year. For every assignment you give in Google Classroom, Google automatically creates a folder with that assignment name. I know that Gabby did a really good job on her Who is the Best Cat essay. So I'm going to open this up, and this is all of my students' work. Now, obviously, I only have one student. You would have a whole bunch. So I can go to that view. So that's how you switch between detailed view and grid view. So this I want to keep as an example. So I don't just want to take it because I'm eventually going to return this to Gabby. I am going to make a copy of this assignment. And then it creates a copy. I can click on it, and if I just push the N key, N as in Nancy, I can then change, instead of saying copy of, I can say example work Gabby cat essay, and then say OK. Now I want to move this to my folder that has all of the student example work. So I can right click on it and then move to, and then I want to go backwards. So if you notice, here's the breadcrumb. I need to go back. So I'm going to click on this back arrow. So now I'm in example class. I want to keep going back. Now I'm in 2021. I want to keep going back. Here's my student example. If I go back one more by accident and I go all the way back to my drive, that's okay. Just click on classroom and then you see student examples. And if I scroll down, it says move. So I can open it and I can move here. So it's just saying everyone who can see Who is the Best Cat will lose access. So I took it out of that folder, but I made a copy of it. So this warning, I don't care because I'm moving it. I made a copy. So Gabby still has hers. And then this is mine. So I'm like, okay. And then I move. So it's in there. So I can go back here, go back in the breadcrumbs to classroom. student example, and then there's that. So next year when I give the who is the best cat assignment, I can say, hey, here's an exemplary example of that. Not required. Just, I'm thinking while you have the student work in there before you return it and you remove them and everything, if there's some good stuff, you can make a copy of it. All right, Google Classroom calendars. When we added all of the principals to the Google Classrooms at the beginning of the year, which was a great idea, they actually had a whole bunch of calendars show up in their calendar. So they had to go in and hide those calendars. So like I said, if you don't own the class, if you didn't create the class, don't delete the calendar. Just hide it. And to do this, you can go to the classwork and click on the class calendar. But I would just suggest going to your calendar that you have. And then you notice here, I have example class. So I don't have it highlighted. And that's another way so that you get, so if I click off of one of these calendars, it's gone. So your main calendar at the top is your name. And so if I click off of that, it's gone. So that is one option, but then it's still here, you know? So if you don't want to see them ever again, you can, so let me see. I really don't want to get rid of any of these. Here we go. Tech Roundtable. So this is one that I am a part of. I don't own it. So if I just click on this X, that will unsubscribe me. So it gives me a little warning, and I always read these warnings. So it's saying I will no longer have access to this calendar. Other people with access can continue using it. So I'm not wiping it off the face of the earth. I'm just getting it out of my view. Okay. So I actually don't want to remove it, but if I did, I would just click remove calendar, but I'm going to cancel that. Another way that you could do it is you could just, let me go down here. I'm going to hide the Tech Roundtable. So I'm just going to hide it from the list. So you'll notice, watch for it, wait for it. Boom, it's gone. So you can hide it from your list, but then it's still there. So if I want to find it, I can go to any one of these and just go to settings. And you can see, where's Tech Roundtable? So Tech Roundtable, and it has a little eyeball with a line through it. That means it's hidden. Okay. Let's say I want to go in and I'm like, you know what, this template one, I'm never going to use a calendar for this because it's a template for my class. So I'm never actually adding students to it. I'm not assigning due dates to stuff. So I can actually get rid of it. So I can click on it once and it brings up all of these calendar settings for this. And just make sure that you're in the right calendar template. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and you can click delete. And this is like wiping it from the face of the earth. This calendar will be permanently erased. No one will be able to use it anymore. So if I do that, it should bring up a warning. You're about to permanently delete this for everyone who uses it. Now I know this is my template class that I created, so I'm fine with it. I'm gonna permanently delete it just because I want to clean stuff up. And then you just go back here. And then that's how you can clean up your calendars. If you plan to delete your class calendar, you may want to print the class calendar to a PDF to reference due dates next year. So you have kind of a guide throughout the year of when things were due. And to do that, so let's say, you know, I only want to see the example class. So I'm gonna click on the snowman and display only that calendar. Instead of the week view, I'm gonna click schedule. So this will show all of the things that were due in May, but when you go to print, You can change that. So I want this to be from the beginning of the year to June. You can change the font size to normal, and then you can choose these also. And then you can click print. Whenever you click print, you always have the option to print to an actual printer or save as a PDF. I'd rather just save it somewhere and then I can look at it later. But if you see, what it looks like is it then brings up this calendar of the year, and this is all the calendars for that class. So this is example class, Sarah Hoffman, name of the class, who owns it, and then these are all of the assignments from that calendar, or from that classroom. And then I can just save it in my drive somewhere. And I would then upload it to my Google Drive and put it in the classroom folder. All right, now the last thing is archiving your Google Classroom. We're almost there. We're so close. Once again, do not archive or delete classes that are still in session. If you're still teaching and collecting assignments, don't archive it, because once you archive it, the kids can't turn in any work. The next point here is removing students, and it is optional and totally up to you if you remove your students or if you choose to just leave your students in your archive classes. It is up to you. But I want you to know what happens if you don't remove them. I would remove the students from my class before I archived. If you do not remove the students before you archive your class, the students can still see the assignments. They cannot interact with the content, but they can still see everything in the classroom that you assigned. But let me just show you a student view. So here I'm going to bring up Gabby's account. So this is Gabby. Gabby can just click on this hamburger menu and go down here to archived classes. So these are archived classes that she still has access to. But she can also go into the classwork page and she can see. So here's a Google form assignment. So this class is archived, but the teacher, me, did not remove Gabby. So Gabby can go into this. She can actually click on the quiz, answer the questions, submit it, and it's going to be there. So I didn't know students could still interact with the forms, and I think it's just the forms because she can't turn anything else into the other classes that are archived. So this, to me, is reason to remove students from your class at the end of the year. After you're done accepting all of the assignments, you would remove them. So let me just show you real quick how you remove students from your Google Classroom. I gotta get to my classroom. So here's my class. I'm gonna go to the people section. I'm gonna click on the top box, and that then selects everyone. And then the action drop-down menu, just click on this and then click remove. So the template is here for me to play with. And even if I would delete any assignments, they're still here. It's just, this is something you can play with. And then when you're ready to archive the class, you go in and just click archive and it's gone. This is still here, so I can still play around with that, but the class is gone. If you want to recover the class, just go down here to your archive classes. So I did that kind of fast. So go up to your hamburger menu, click archived classes, and the archived classes, you notice they have like little lines going through it. And once again, the skinny snowman always has cool things, and you just click restore. One thing you might want to do, guess what? Add an emoji to the beginning of your 2021 class tiles. So before you archive, you might want to do that. because when you go to reuse a post, those emojis, they kind of jump out at you. And I will tell you about reusing a post in a minute. This just walks you through. Go to the main menu, click the skinny snowman, select archive, and just like what I walked you through there. Reusing a post is really cool. So even though you archived the class, you can still use the assignments in the future. I'm going to go to my Newsela example class, go to classwork, and I'm going to click create. If some of you may know all about this, and then you could skip ahead if you want, is you have this option to reuse a post. I wish it was called reuse assignments, but it's called reuse post. And then you see I have all of these classes, and then I can click on this. So I can click on my example class. It brings up all of the assignments that I've ever given in my example class. So here's an assignment, demonstrate understanding. So I like that assignment. I actually added a little emoji to it. So I'm going to click it. I do not want to create new copies of all attachments. I don't want to click that. And I just want to click reuse. So what's this going to do is it brings up the assignment. It also brings up all of the attachments that I used in that assignment. When you reuse an assignment, there is no due date. So you would want to set a due date when you're reusing an assignment. You can change the points. You can check for plagiarism, the originality report. That we only have so many of those. And I don't know how many. I don't know how many we're paying for. Oh, look at this. We have 5 free assignments that you can check for plagiarism. I could pick other classes that I want it assigned to or not. If I have it in this one class, I could just assign it to certain students or all of the students. Doesn't look like I have any students in that class. And then I just click assign. So that is, or you can save it as a draft, or you could schedule it. There are other options. So that's how you reuse an assignment, or it's called reuse post, but it's you're digging into your stuff and you're reusing it. I would suggest not deleting assignments, because I know some teachers are like, I'm just going to delete these assignments because, it's just getting cluttered. If you delete them, you can never reuse them. And you put a lot of work into your, into your assignments that you give. So my suggestion is don't delete anything. My suggestion is don't delete anything, because you can reuse them in the future. All right, and you guys are probably done with this, but here's a bonus idea if you want one, is you could create an awesome assignments classroom. And I know you guys had some amazing assignments that had like big aha moments with your students. You can curate those assignments in an awesome assignment classroom. And then when you go to reuse the posts next year, you won't have to scroll through all of last year's class catalog to get to the one you want. So the way that you do this is you just create a classroom, call it awesome assignments, and then you would go into the classwork page, reuse post, and just pick out all of those really great assignments that you had throughout the year. So then you could go in and be like, you know what? I really like this Jamboard example, pros and cons. I'm going to reuse that. And you don't have to set a due date. You could just save it as a draft, or you can assign it. I mean, there's no one in your class, so it really doesn't matter. This is just a place where you're going to house awesome assignments. And then you could just keep going through. You just keep going through, reuse posts, and just pick all of those awesome assignments. And then when you go next year, you just have like a smaller library to choose from. one of the questions that came up today during the PD when I forgot to hit record like a dummy is some people ask, can students see the questions and answers in a Google form? So I was playing around with the settings to see what settings you have to select so that the students do not see the test questions. Because a lot of you use Google Forms for quizzes and tests, so you may not want your students to have access in the future. It's a tough one because you want to go over the test. You want them to see the test so they can see their answers, see why they missed the questions that they have. But you could do that in front of the students and go over it, or one-on-one where you bring, you talk to them one-on-one without releasing their scores so that they, you could set it up where you still go over the answers, which you 100%, you have to give feedback to your students. Like, I'm not, you guys know that you have to give feedback, but there was a concern that, hey, all of these kids have my test. The way that you can set it so that they don't have access to the test is you would set up the settings just like I have on this screen, and this is the quiz, like make it a quiz tab in the settings, and you turn everything else off. Now, of course, you can turn on locked mode. That's up to you. With release grades, you want to say later after manual review. And then if you decide that you want to release the scores to the students, there is on the actual form, after the students are done, there is there's a release scores little button right there. And then when you click that to release the scores, it'll say, who do you want to release it to? So maybe you only want to release it to a couple kids and maybe not everyone, because someone has to retake it or whatnot. So you can choose when you release those scores. So someone in the group mentioned that, they probably had it set to immediately after each submission that the student saw their scores. So if I took the American history quiz first hour and it was set to immediately after each student submits, I get my score right away. I give it to my best friend. Possibly. I would never do that. And I don't think any of our kids would, but they might. So if you have it set to later, after I do it, then you could release those scores, 2 days later or the next day in class while they're sitting there. You could be like, boop, and release the scores. But then they would have access to their scores. So this was a big discussion, and I didn't know the answer to it, and I was kind of frustrated. So I kept going back, forth, and this is the setting that I landed on. And Gabby did not see her scores until I released the scores, and then she got an email that allowed her to see the quiz and the answers. Everyone had great questions and great suggestions today during the PD day, so thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you guys are great about emailing me. Do not hesitate to email me, or you can make an appointment with me at sarahhoffman.youcanbook.me. And then if you want a personal spring cleaning session, we can go through that, or if you have questions about any of this. All right, have a great night.